Asylum seekers have been regularly sleeping on the sidewalks outside an intake center in the downtown of Toronto as they seek a space in the shelter system. The city started referring refugees to federal programs in June instead of admitting them to the municipal shelter system. It wants more funding from Ottawa to cover the increased demand for refugee spaces. Well, Diana Chan McNally is a harm reduction manager at All Saints Shelter and Church. She joins me now. Thank you. Welcome to the program. Welcome to our studio. I want to sort of start by getting your reaction here because we know the city and the federal government have been sort of negotiating here a funding plan. But at the same time, while that's happening, we know asylum seekers are stuck looking for shelter. What is the situation right now?
It's pretty dire, and now that we've had some public attention paid to 129 Peter Street, we're actually seeing even more people coming to the site with very high-level needs. So right now, I'd say we see a minimum of about 130 people. They rotate through the day. We have folks who are sleeping on the sidewalk every single night and have been doing so for over a month. So the health needs, the psychosocial needs are extremely high, and we're just trying at a very basic level to make sure that people can stay well.
How are they doing? Because as you mentioned, there are needs. There are social cycle needs, there are health needs, but also there's the reality of they've come presumably to this country to try and come to a safe place. And here they are arriving and ending up with no place to go and living on the street. So I'm wondering, what are they telling you about how they're doing?
I mean, this is compounded trauma. Like you said, people are coming from very traumatic circumstances. We have a lot of Ugandan refugees who are fleeing because of persecution of LGBTQ people. So they don't have support for the persecution, obviously, that they were facing at home. And when they arrive here, we're compounding that trauma by forcing people to live in the most desperate situations. So people are not doing well. I think that's no surprise, or should be no surprise to anyone. And the fact that we are withholding these most basic resources from them is absolutely making their traumatic situations far worse.
We know shelters in the city of Toronto have been at or near capacity for some time now. So how has the situation changed since the city declared it could not shelter those newcomers?
I mean, I think what we saw is profiling of people. So if they're disclosing their status of the city of Toronto, saying, I'm here as an asylum seeker, I'm here as a refugee claimant, they're being automatically denied entry to the shelter system, which is why we have so many people who are unsheltered on the sidewalk. At the same time, you're right, the shelter system is still full. What we're looking for is essentially to increase the capacity overall for people to go into the system by creating this separate federal space for refugees and asylum claimants they can access, which will create more shelter in the base system for absolutely everybody. So this is a larger homelessness issue as well.
A larger homelessness issue as well. I just want to talk to you about solutions in the short term, because we know the new mayor of Toronto, Olivia Chow, says she is trying to get more funding from the federal government, but that's going to take time. So what do you think is a solution in the interim here?
Well, we need to deploy emergency resources. We have a refugee encampment in the middle of downtown Toronto. You're right in that if we actually put through these resources for hotels from the federal government, if the provincial government steps up as well because they have obligations, it won't be immediate. What I want to see is immediate emergency solutions deployed to the street to make sure that people have access to shelter, have access to basic needs, because right now it's falling on the shoulders of us, and we're crowdfunding from other people who are extremely generous, but it's not a sustainable solution, mutual aid. So we need the Office of Emergency Management on site. That should be their purview, and yet for some reason they're not there. So I'd like to see that immediately.
Have you had the opportunity to speak with them?
I have not, actually. We have been advocating that they be deployed. They have an encampment office, which normally is removing encampments in parks, but we have a refugee encampment that needs support. Why can they not be redirected to that site?
What are sort of the greatest needs in your right now, immediately?
Exactly what you would expect for people with no shelter whatsoever. So protection from the elements. We know that people are out in the rain. They get soaked. We have brought event tents for people to shelter under, but that's not adequate shelter. So what we've seen are things like trench foot, people with extreme hunger pangs, unmanaged diabetes, a lot of health implications for people who don't have access to shelter and resources. So it's a high-level health need, and the fact that we're not seeing a lot of support on site for that is really distressing.
You have been in this space for quite some time. Has it ever been this bad?
It has never been this bad. I have never seen anything like this. We're always advocating for more resources for people who are unhoused, but right now we're seeing an entire population being withheld any resources effectively. They have access to water, some sandwiches, TTC tokens on site from the city, but ultimately, again, that is not enough to meet people's basic needs. People are getting increasingly emotionally distressed because, as I said, they're out here on the sidewalk now for over a month for some of them. They're not doing well.
So what is then, Dinah, your message to both the city, provincial governments, federal governments here as they attempt to sort of find a solution?
For the federal government, I have to say this is not just about Toronto. There are a lot of municipalities in Ontario and beyond, really, that do not have the resources to actually support and shelter refugees. So they need to make these financial commitments if we're going to tout ourselves on the world stage as a human rights defender. We're violating these human rights on a daily basis by not providing these resources. So they must step up. It is ultimately their responsibility. For the provincial government, we need to restore funding for healthcare for uninsured people. That's creating huge roadblocks for us to make sure that people's health needs are actually met. We're trying our best, but again, if we don't have that coverage, we have to cover that healthcare expense on our own. And for the City of Toronto, this cannot go on much longer. This is any longer, quite frankly. This is inadequate. We are using people as political pawns, as bargaining chips for funding commitments from these other levels of government, and it's not okay. It's actually morally reprehensible, and we need to reverse that decision immediately.
Thank you for taking the time to come in today. Diana Chan McNally is a harm reductions manager at All Saints in Toronto.